like we had a really interesting conversation the other day around disabled access, like, wanting to go somewhere. And I said, oh, yeah, that's fine, but, a wheelchair wouldn't be able to get through there because of the surface is too rough. And the pair of them were outraged at the idea. Well, that's just not okay. Well, they should just make a path that everyone should be able to go on. And things like that, which is lovely.
Hi, I'm Leanne Watson. I'm so happy to have you here on our podcast talk show, You, Me and Muscular Dystrophy. I'll be asking 10 questions of each guest, exploring the humanity and experiences of living with MD. I'm so happy to have you here. One thing we will be learning in this podcast is that with the many forms of MD, there are different journeys for everyone, and a lot of muscular dystrophies rely on the person having a great deal of support around them to get them through each day. Forever, mothers have helped all of us in some way or another. But what's life like when your child has a degenerative neuromuscular condition? Here we are today speaking to the lovely Kate, the devoted, nurturing mother of a young child with LGMD, that's Limb Girdle Muscular Dystrophy. Hello, Kate. Thanks so much for coming in on.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's really nice to be here.
Yeah, it is for me too. We've seen each other a bit on a Facebook support group. So first off, my first question is normally, who are you and what is your association with muscular dystrophy? Is there any more you'd like to add to my introduction on that one?
No, that's fine. Thank you for that lovely introduction. So yes, I'm a parent and specifically a mother of a child who has Limb Girdle Muscular Dystrophy type Y or 9, I think it is. My son is 7. He was diagnosed when he was 5 in 2023. So 7 currently. And yeah, it's been it's definitely been a journey, I suppose, as like it certainly wasn't a condition that I had any real awareness of in particular prior to him getting his diagnosis. So it was definitely a lot of learning along the way.
Yeah. And is that a typical age to get diagnosed with LGMD, from childhood? What sort of signs were leading up to that? I know some people, LGMD is different, it presents so differently. Sometimes kids drop foot. Was there one thing in particular that sort of made you reach out to the diagnosis?
Yeah. So I guess he had a number of the most obvious thing for me was tiptoe walking, which he had done from a relatively young age, like around as a toddler, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
I did also notice that he, he didn't, in terms of gross motor skills compared to, say, other children at his preschool at the time, he wasn't sort of as fast as, say, running or things like that. But at the same time, I guess it didn't really occur to me that might be anything to be too concerned about. I guess it was just sort of, I just assumed it was, I guess part of his gross motor skills and his development. So the tiptoe walking was the main symptom, and I guess I quite often say to him, "Stop walking on your tiptoes; like it's not good for your feet." And he would, go down onto flat feet for a little bit, but would inevitably pop back up on his tiptoes again. It's just his natural way of walking. And then I guess at a certain point in time, I had sort of noticed that his calves had gotten quite pronounced at the back of his legs as well, from what I assumed was from all the tiptoe walking. And then at some point in time, I'd say to him, "Stop walking on your tiptoes." And he said to me, "I can't, like it hurts when I put my feet down flat." And I thought, oh, okay, it was sort of, I guess a bit of a trigger for me to go and see a GP and then get a referral. And they referred me through to the local paediatric relevant outpatients unit, I suppose, at the Children's Hospital where we live. And the diagnosis and process, I suppose, progressed from there.
Now, your journey at the moment with LGMD and with your son has only been a few years, 2 years officially, I guess, but a bit longer. but they can be very long, 2 years, of course. So my next question might be a bit tricky, but it still might be interesting. When you were young, what did you imagine your grown-up life or future would look like? Do you feel that what you envisaged sort of changed, or do you see that it might change from what you imagined? Like, will this
Yeah,
make a
I
difference, I guess, to what you imagined?
Yeah, I guess that's something that we're in the middle of navigating at the moment, and there would be a lot of families out there whose journey with having a child with a neuromuscular condition or with muscular dystrophy would be far more advanced than mine in terms of caring responsibilities or those adaptations or that that idea of what that picture of what you thought your life would look like being, I guess, different to what you expected.
Yes.
I mean, I suppose you don't take your children's health for granted at all. But I suppose that's probably part of the challenging part of muscular dystrophy, where it does present in childhood for that child, but also for their families, is that you have um, a child or children who you would have that if those symptoms sort of present in those early childhood years, somewhere between say 2 to 6 to 7 or whatever it might be, that you've had a picture of what your life would be like, and you've assumed that your child is healthy otherwise or is otherwise healthy, and then that suddenly changes, and it's not a small change; it's a huge change
Yeah.
in terms of what.
The trajectory and
And
the,
that's exactly right. I
how
suppose,
it will play out for him physically.
yeah, that's right, and mm, I guess that's. Uh, that can um, obviously that's a huge thing, and there's the grief as a parent that goes with um, uh, worrying about your child and worrying about their ability to cope and how them adapting and adjusting to things over time. But there's all the practical stuff that goes with it as well, and that I guess you constantly. I guess it's the mental load that you're taking on top of all of the other mental load of parenting around whether it's small things or big things, like planning for, needing a car that is capable of having an electronic wheelchair at some point in the future, and thinking about, living arrangements and making accommodations and not having a two-story house, for example, or just lots of things. I guess bigger picture stuff around making life decisions, but there's also just the smaller things that around planning trips away, or planning a day trip. And my son isn't a full-time wheelchair user at this point in time. Just those constant sort of accommodations that you're making in your mind around. Oh, it'd be nice to do this walk, but that's probably not an option. It would be nice if we could plan this outing for the day as a family, but that's going to involve adjusting X, Y, and Z, which of course for anyone who is part of the disabled community, like those are the constant challenges that you come up against. But is that that planning component. And I think for
It's
where we
huge.
are in terms of, it is huge, yeah. And I think in terms of where we are at the moment, the there's the planning for now, and then there's the planning ahead. So it's the
Yeah.
managing both, I suppose, at the same time.
And your brain's probably kind of doing it all at once, all the time kind of thing. You've sort of got to be ahead and ahead of things as much as possible all the time. It's sort of almost relentless, really, isn't it? The kind of the thought processes.
Yeah,
It would
that's
feel
right.
like
And I
that at
think,
times.
yeah, definitely at times. I mean, I guess at the same time, life just sort of continues on as it tends to do. So I think,
Does he have
I think that,
siblings?
yes, he does. He has a brother who's a bit older, and that presents its own challenges when I suppose you've got the dynamic of an older brother and a younger brother, and one sort of
Hmm.
becoming more and more aware of their physical limitations and the fact that they're different to other kids, and having an older brother
Right.
that he sort of looks up to a lot, I suppose, and really wants to keep up with, and um, isn't able to.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. But they're interesting is an understatement, really. of everything. But it's also interesting, actually, more important, what I was thinking, to continue my thought there, just how the dynamics do work out within families and siblings, just to, as they get older, like how the protectiveness might kind of come into play, with your older son, and, that sort of thing, sort of, a bit of sharing and sort of awareness, and helping raise maybe more compassionate children, when they're sort of
Yeah,
already
I
used to
think
that.
you're absolutely right. I think it's definitely one of those things that, I mean, kids, I think we don't tend to give kids as much credit as we should a lot of the time. I think kids can quite often be a lot more adaptable and resilient than adults can. But there is that lived experience, I suppose, of being able to understand and or have the empathy for what it's like for someone who might have additional needs for whatever reason, because you're like in the case of my children, they're obviously siblings, but yeah, I have noticed that there's been it just sort of opens up their minds a lot more to thinking about, like we had a really interesting conversation the other day around disabled access, wanting to go somewhere. And I said, oh, yeah, that's fine. But, a wheelchair wouldn't be able to get through there because of the surface is too rough. And, the pair of them were outraged at the idea. Well, that's just not okay. Well, they should just make a path that everyone should be able to go on.
Yes.
And things like that, which is
Yeah,
lovely.
that's right. That's gorgeous. I'm really hoping more and more of this generation, our children, your children's generation, are kind of more open-minded with all that sort of thing, and more socially aware.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. I
would be
think they are
important.
anyway, but it is nice just to see them come to those conclusions by themselves. I
It's
think the flip side,
gorgeous.
though, of sort of that compassion and empathy is also not just. I think, I think it's fair to say that when you do have a child that has, a medical condition, whatever it might be, they do, whether it's due to the caring component or the responsibility component, or just you worrying about them or navigating, the NDIS or anything like. It takes up a lot of time, of a lot of your
Mm.
time
Yes.
in
Yeah.
whichever way, and so and it is hard to get that balance right between where you do have other children, or not like trying to make sure that you're validating the fact that that impacts them as well.
Yeah.
My other son is quite sporty and active, and so our inability to do active, or is some of the limitations that we have as a family in terms of doing active things, or playing sport or whatever it might be. Like that does impact him, and he does feel it, and or just smaller things like that. I can see that he, to his credit, makes that he sort of adjusts or adapts when they're playing together games or things that they're doing, because he knows that so that his father can join in or keep up. But that is also, I guess, him constantly making concessions and or making changes or adjustments, and which is a big ask. That's a big thing for a child to take on too. And I think, and it does sort of have a bit take up. There is a bit of a load there, so it's completely understandable that that they might get frustrated with that situation, or just feel like they're a little bit invisible sometimes too, I guess, or wanting your time and your attention, but feeling like yeah, it's a really hard dynamic to manage. This, I think parent guilt or mum guilt is a pretty common thing regardless. But I feel like when you throw in having one child with additional needs and one that doesn't, it makes it even more challenging.
Absolutely. That's right. Yeah, absolutely. And you sound like you really are dealing with it very, very well, and, being so aware of, both your son's situations, your situation. How are you dealing with it yourself? Like, as far as, because, like, it's what we've found anyway, I've found with my husband, it's a different sort of caring role and parent, but it's been absolutely imperative for Gary to have his time. And it's sort of a bit easier because I'm an adult and I can decide that I'll have, support people around. How do you, as a mother, do you sort of allow yourself to have a little bit of time too? Have a
Yes.
wine with some girls or whatever?
Yeah. So my children, their dad and I are separated, but we have a good relationship. where we have, really good communication, get along quite well. So that does give me a bit of downtime here and there when they're with their dad, and vice versa for him as well. So that's helpful. I think it's a challenge for parenting for anyone is trying to build in those moments of having some downtime where you can reset and recharge. And then, I'm not sure I've nailed it, to
That's
be honest. I think, but I think that's probably part of as you say, that's part of the particular challenge of parenting, full stop. But I suppose in a way that, when we're talking about muscular dystrophy and or any other sort of similar condition where it's just sort of amplifying some of those existing things where, yes, there's most parents have, find that have that challenge of trying to balance the needs of both their children or trying to have some time to themselves or whatever it might be. But I feel like it's just amplified or exacerbated a little bit when you throw something like muscular dystrophy into the mix too.
Yeah, definitely.
But But having said that, I'm
What do you wish?
also quite conscious of the fact that we are, compared to, like, I don't feel like I'm in a position to speak for a lot of other families who have or represent carers or parents of children with muscular dystrophy or a neuromuscular condition, because there would be a lot of people with a lot more experience out there than me.
That's why these sort of conversations are important, I think, because um, everybody's going through their thing, at their stage, at different, you starting out might be helpful for someone who's only just been diagnosed, maybe whose child's just been diagnosed, or that sort of thing. While I agree, I can't talk on behalf of everyone with LGMD or adult onset LGMD in particular, but the more of us that talk about, just how we're feeling, I guess hopefully the more sort of part of a community the rest of us feel, maybe some people learn from that
Yeah,
as well and
definitely.
take something away.
Definitely, because I was just going to say, I think that's why this is such a great initiative, though, too, because it is such a rare condition. And so, the care and support networks that are readily available and in place for other, when you're navigating another sort of one of those life-changing sort of diagnosis moments that might require ongoing medical treatment or whatever it might be, that, that
Yeah.
there is visibility of or that are out there that the public health system can tap you into because they're accessible. That's not the case for these types of conditions, and it is really isolating. It's really hard trying to find information that you can understand. And there's so much uncertainty as well, I think, too. What
Yeah.
particularly for with the exception of Duchenne muscular dystrophy, so much variation in
Yes.
terms of how symptoms progress and what that can look like for people. And so you're really sort of in a bit of a watch and wait cycle sometimes of just being like, oh, you see something new happen, or you see sort of, I guess a change in something, and you think, oh,
Mm.
is that temporary? Is that permanent? Is this sort of the start
Mm.
of a change or a decline, or is this the last time I'm going to see this happen? Like it is really hard.
And my husband has always likened it to a game of snakes and ladders where there's mostly snakes. So, yeah, it's snakes that go down, isn't it? Yeah, that's right. And you think that it's plateauing for a little while and then something, all of a sudden, it'll seem like, there's another snake that you're sliding down. But then, yeah, and you just don't know. You really don't know, do you?
Yeah, that's
And
right.
having said that, but there's a lot of experiences, obviously, a lot of the ups and downs and things. Has there been one moment in your caring role as a mother of someone with LGMD that's been your most pivotal moment, would you say? A bit of an obvious question in some ways. I don't know. You might surprise us.
Yeah, well, I suppose, yeah, I think receiving the diagnosis was probably the pivotal moment, I suppose. Yeah, without speaking for others, I dare say that's probably a bit universal for anyone. I think our most recent, and I think in our circumstances, it was just so my son had gone into, taken him in to, just to get an assessment done of his tiptoe walking, as I mentioned earlier. And they had, at some point in time, I guess a physiotherapist and or someone that had a look at him at that point in time had red flagged some of his movements, but obviously, as being a potential underlying cause there. But obviously, they hadn't discussed that with me at the time. So when we went back in, I was thinking we were just going in to get some plaster casts made up for, just to
Uh,
correct the atrophy that he had in his legs that had been identified, and sort of walked into a room where there was a pediatric neurologist, a social worker, physiotherapist, an occupational therapist, a few other people, and so it was a bit like, oh gosh, okay, like
yeah,
something's
wow.
something's going
Yeah.
on here, and
Yeah,
so
who don't normally get this cast of thousands.
yeah, that's right, and so I guess I sort of had a red flag in my mind of being like, okay, something's not quite right, something's going on here, and then yeah, by the end of the day, left the hospital after they'd done some blood tests and some other things to be told that he had a condition which I vaguely had some visibility of in terms of, I guess, the reasons why, the reasons that exist for why kids might have some muscle atrophy in their calves, but it's certainly not something that I was thinking that that's what that day would look like. So
And had you heard of muscular dystrophy before that?
not properly. I mean, yes, on the periphery in terms of being something that I had vague awareness of, but if you'd actually asked me to describe the condition and what was involved and what caused it, I wouldn't have been able to answer that
Yeah, me
confidently or
too.
properly at all. Yeah. So, and then I guess there was, like, for anyone who's gone through this process, there was then subsequent genetic testing to determine the type of muscular dystrophy that he had based on his age at the time and gender and symptoms and presentation. He was given a clinical diagnosis of Duchenne muscular dystrophy, but that was later confirmed through genetic testing that it was Limb Girdle Muscular Dystrophy, which was also really hard to, I guess, because there's a different trajectory there in terms of what that looks like. Yeah, I guess, and I just another pivotal moment, I suppose, more recently was just been that he's gotten his first manual wheelchair, and that's been
Okay,
excellent. It's been so good. Again,
great.
like he, I think we've sort of like taken the approach of not bombarding the kids with too much information, but also not wanting to hide anything from them. So I guess when he has questions, I always try and answer them honestly. So we've talked about it because he's asked me like about, whether he might need a wheelchair in the future. And I've said, yes, that's probably going to be the case. But again, like, speaking about the resilience of kids and their courage, like, is not concerned by the idea at all. Like, from the moment that was mentioned, he's quite interested in the idea and quite positive about it all. And he'll get online and look up different wheelchairs and, this one's purple and this one you can like, this one's got bulldozer tracks on it, so it's 4-wheel drive and you take it over here. It's got all these great ideas.
Excellent.
Oh, I found this video of this one that's like, it's like a adaptable mountain bike and you can take it on these tracks, so he's glow in the dark frames. He's got all of these ideas. He's really,
It's
really
got all
positive
of it,
about.
yeah.
Yeah, which is so lovely. But it was really,
It's a
yeah, it's been really great for him just to have that as an option. He doesn't need it all the time, but I hadn't realized how much, um, I'd realized how much I was sort of, planning and, as I said, doing that planning about, can he can't walk this far or we won't be able to do this or this would be an issue, but not necessarily having an easy option, an easy accessible option to provide those, to open up opportunities for him. But it became obvious to me that he was starting to do that thinking for himself in terms of thinking, not wanting to agree to do things because he was, conscious of whether, he could walk that far or if, his legs getting tight and that sort of thing. And so it's just opened up being able to go
the
for a
world for
walk
him.
together as a family. Yeah. There's
It's
small things like
great.
that where
You can see
it
him
is
really making the most out of his life, like making
definitely,
even
yeah.
more out of each day. Yeah, that's so
And that
great.
was the advice that I've received from the hospital recently is about, you know, like the idea is to like, um, and I suppose that's reflected in his NDIS plan too, is that like the idea is to obviously for him to be able to do the things that he wants to do in a way that that he can. But I guess it's
Yeah,
very the way that it was described to me recently by the pediatric neurologist was that it's very much about energy conservation. That's the key. So um, conserve his energy for the things that he wants to do, and don't use that energy up on, for example, if he wants to
yeah,
play at the park, don't use all your energy walking to the park. Just use the chair to get over there, and then he can get out
down
of it
there.
and he can go and play at the park, and that's fine. But it's saving that energy,
Perfect.
like, yeah, really thinking about everything through an energy conservation mindset so that he can do the things that he wants to do as opposed to becoming,
Yeah.
getting tired easily and being exhausted, just doing all
It's an
the boring
interesting
stuff in
concept
between.
for a 7-year-old to grasp, isn't it? Interesting. That's great though. That he's learning that now. That'll stand him in good
Yeah,
stead, hopefully, as time goes
yeah,
on as well.
definitely. I mean,
Yeah.
I
That
think what's sort of been my observation is that I think kids are naturally in tune with themselves because they haven't necessarily absorbed all of that other stuff that tells them to, you know, ignore that feeling or push through or whatever it might be. And so, they are really good at saying like, yeah, well, unless I want to go to bed for something like that, or get out of doing some jobs. But they are sort of in tune with their body and that feeling of being tired
yeah.
or needing to have some downtime. They might not always be able to communicate it in a way that, but I think they are aware. They have that awareness.
Yeah, yeah, as an adult. Yeah, there's sort of a different awareness, but so where do you find your hope and joy, Kate? Like
I
to,
think,
when it's sort of when you get a bit low, is there anything, any source in particular or anything you reach for or
yeah, I guess just like small things. I think that like having interests that are, for me, things that I enjoy doing, like whether it be some gardening or something like that, or I enjoy going walking. We live in a nice part of the world where there's a lot of bush around, so I'm very fortunate to be able to go and wander along and find a tree to sit under, which is always nice.
like
I
and we're just
think,
seeing these little advancements um, go through, like seeing the joy that he's gotten now, that your son has now of being in a wheelchair now. Are those little moments of joy for you as well? That you know
yeah,
that
absolutely,
that life really
absolutely.
doesn't have to be all downhill for him. That that
No,
that he's
it's that ongoing,
into it
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's
well.
that really hard balance to get right within yourself about not sort of dismissing the way that you're feeling with it if you're sort of grieving something or feeling frustrated or whatever it might be. But also, you then also sort of feel the guilt of feeling that way, of being like, I shouldn't be framing this in such like as in my mind as being a negative thing, because then I feel like I'm like that's the wrong way to view it. But at the same time, you don't want to be too positive and then try and dismiss the
No,
fact that you're frustrated about something or you're finding something hard, or like
yeah,
it's that sort of constant
it's that balance, isn't
tension
it? And
within yourself.
there's so many posts and memes and things about the way we supposedly should be approaching and reacting to different situations, and but there's got to be sort of a healthy balance of pragmatism and realism in knowing the situation generally sucks, because no one doesn't want to not be able to use their arms and legs if they had a choice. But then
Yeah,
also
definitely.
the reality of trying to be an optimist and using the resources that are available to us now, in getting, in maintaining the best quality of life,
Absolutely.
possible.
I think seeing, like, yeah, just touching on something you mentioned earlier in terms of hope and joy, I think seeing the reaction of his peers and his friends and everyone, like, around him when, I guess, like the way that kids are, like that inclusivity that's there. I don't want to say I feel like there's been a change there, because I feel like there has been compared to say when I was perhaps his age. Um, but for example, like he took his wheelchair to a school event recently, and it was the first time that he'd done that. So the school that he's at, pretty lucky, it's all pretty flat, so he's able to get around okay. And it's a small school; it doesn't have a large degree, so he doesn't he used it at school previously. But they went on an excursion, so he took it because it involved hiking up this hill. And the other kids were just like, there wasn't like, they were naturally interested. They were naturally sort of, oh, like, Ruben, what have you got that for? What have you done to yourself? But they're just like so open and so accepting. And all his mates were like, um, they were talking about, turning him into go kart and doing this and pushing him around and giving him, like, nicknaming him, I don't know what nickname they're giving him, Wheels or something like that. Just so lovely. Like they're so enthusiastic, and inclusive, and it's really lovely to see. I,
That's beautiful.
um, it is, and I think it really helps with kids being able to advocate for themselves as well, and feeling like they're able to talk about talk about the condition that they have or what they can and can't do, and
Yeah.
that self advocacy is really important because,
Yeah.
and that's the other thing that does give me, that it really gives me hope as well, is that he has the ability to do that, and he always has done. There's never been that. I mean, obviously that he has his own feelings about, um, feeling isolated or that he can't keep up with his friends or whatever it might be. But at the same time, I feel like he's always been able to sort of. There hasn't been that sense of shame. I think that you feel that then
Mm,
would otherwise be. He's able to advocate for himself and say what he needs, and have the confidence to do that because he's got the right language and the right things, the skills to be able to advocate for himself, but also because it just
that's
comes from
kudos to you
from that it comes from that
by
foundation, I
the
think,
sound.
of just sort of like knowing what you need, and being able to communicate that. But it comes from that place of not feeling like that there's something that's something to be ashamed of, or that it's something that um
Yeah.
that if that, or
Something
that
that's
there's
been
like a
inbuilt
medical
into it.
condition that needs to be hidden away, or that like it's sort of like that it's a secret or anything like that. And so that
Yeah.
always that's it's really lovely to be able to see him do that. Again, it's only just small things, but
But they're actually really
it is
huge,
really
aren't they?
hard.
And you just really
Well, it is,
it
and
it
it is
makes
really
you
hard to say I can't do something or I'm not able to do that when all of your friends
yeah,
can.
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah. And just to see his acceptance like that, I think that's probably a big dash of hopefulness there, hopefulness for the future, hope for the future of, greater compassion towards people with disability and towards the
yeah,
way
definitely.
people think about themselves and not, yeah, not miring themselves down in shame. Well, the last couple of questions we've got is, if you've still got another couple of minutes in you, Kate, is who couldn't you live without and why? And what resources helped you navigate being a carer with, a parent of someone with LGMD?
Yeah. I
You don't have to answer these questions.
I'm very grateful for a range of different reasons, and I'm very grateful to have family that I'm close to that provide a lot of practical and emotional support, which is very much appreciated. I found resources really hard. I think because you're dealing with a rare condition, and because of that sort of variability in terms of what the progression can look like.
Yeah,
Sometimes looking at information is can be helpful, and sometimes it's just not. It's because it's really there's have you can go and find sort of scientific literature around um, you know progress and onset or whatever it might be and there's so much
yeah,
variability there,
yeah.
and you're like, well,
I've found that. Yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
are we going to experience something that looks like this, or it could be something, it could be this the language around
Yeah,
sort of like mild or severe, and you genuinely don't know. It's a case of being like, well, but you do a bit, you start to do some reading, and it just sort of feeds into that mindset of being like, oh, but I've seen, I've noticed this, or if it's this jet, what if it early onset, blah 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 blah, blah. And I think it sometimes it just makes it really
too
hard.
overwhelming. Yeah,
Yeah, too
too.
overwhelming.
Have you found the need to look for resource around being a carer? Like, like thinking of caring as a sort of a role that you might need support through or want to learn more about getting
Yeah,
support at this stage?
I think it was probably starting. It's something that's sort of starting to come into my mind at the moment. We're not quite there yet, and one of the reasons for that is that that level of support's not provided under his MDIS plan at the moment, so that limits those options a little bit in terms of formal supports and or funded supports. But yeah, I think I'm probably just my mind's just sort of starting to transition, or being able to differentiate between parenting, caring responsibilities, and caring for a child with additional needs responsibilities, and that we're probably starting to transition into the latter. I mean,
Yeah.
potentially that was the case for quite some time, but I just sort of thought about it as just being parenting. parenting responsibilities.
Motherhood. Yeah, that's right. Parenting.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Yeah, just sort of absorb it all and yeah.
There's there, that is a really difficult and common sort of, well, maybe you don't need to separate it in some circumstances or a lot of circumstances, but I know that's something that we've discussed at home here. The Gary didn't think of himself as a carer for a very long time. Just felt that was a husband caring for his wife. That's kind of like what love and being in a family is about, sort of thing. But then we got to the stage where it was healthier to recognize that there is a burden, like there just is, a bigger burden emotionally and physically is a bit greater to be able to sort of maintain carrying on. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so sometimes it's useful, but, maybe at your stage, it's not as important to differentiate that.
I'm starting to get into that mindset now where I can recognize that, like, practically in terms of the time in my day that is,
Taken up
yeah,
with
yeah, it's becoming more obvious in my mind around the amount of time that is just spent on small things in terms of assisting him with tasks that he, uh, in other circumstances would be able to do himself at that age. And just,
yeah,
I
yeah,
guess, the small, the small, the bits of time that go into that. I think there's,
yeah.
yeah, I'm starting to recognize
And
that
then the
they're sort of adding up
bureaucratic
and
burden.
having a bit of an impact. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, the NDIS bureaucratic burden and medical burden and, all the rest of it that comes into play. So is there anything, Kate, anything more you would like to, or that you think listeners might want to know about being the mother/carer of a young child with MD?
I think the main thing would be to trust your instincts. Again, I think this is advice for anyone that's navigating a medical system, is that need to advocate for, like in my case, advocate for my child, but also advocate for
Mhm.
yourself and yeah, listen to that voice that sort of, sense of thinking, I don't think something's quite right here, or um, that, like there's just this just has that niggly feeling that this that there's something that isn't quite wrong, and you do need to, particularly in the early diagnosis status, you do need to advocate for your child and go and get referrals and
Yeah.
chase up this and that, the other. Uh, that's and then beyond that, I think, as you said, navigating that process around sort of knowing what it is, that knowing what your child needs, and being able to advocate for them is always really, you're not, again, not unique to helping a child with a neuromuscular condition, but again, I think it's just amplified.
Well, thank you so much, Kate. I really appreciate it.
Problem. Thank you for having.
This is Leanne. Thanks for your time in listening to this podcast, You, Me and Muscular Dystrophy. To continue to help our community, it would be so great if you could like, share, subscribe and or comment on the show. Your feedback is always appreciated, and if you would like to be a guest, please contact me through Instagram, Leanne's_wheel_life, or email leanne@leanneswheellife.com. Take care until we come together on the next episode of You, Me and Muscular Dystrophy.